Let's see if we're live. Sounds like it's working. Yes. Hello and welcome to the first live innovation Q&A on my way to empower 1 million people to innovate. So I will be sharing a couple of questions. I gathered already, but if you're live listening, then of course you can post questions. I will answer them ongoing. Awesome. So I've two different areas I will be answering questions on. So area number one is questions from an innovation perspective from large corporations. Number two is questions from small business and medium business perspective, and then as well questions from an individual perspective, like you as a person. So let's start with corporations. So questions on innovation about corporations. A question I was a lot of ask is like, how do you convince others to innovate in a large corporation? Hello, Paula. Thank you very much for joining. So how do you convince others to innovate? If you're in a large corporation, let's say you're working in an innovation department, in a development department, and you want others to convince you want to convince others to innovate as well. The one thing I have seen that works always successfully is that you work with the others, that you find out what are their needs and desires towards what's going on, and then look into how can you provide value to them. So rather than that you say, hey, you have to innovate and you have to move things forward, you turn this around and look into how can you provide value to the others inside your large organization, and then how can you use innovation as an opportunity to do that. Hello, Karina from Copenhagen. Nice to have you here. So I'm now going into small business. So what do small businesses have questions, and what I've heard in the past? Um, how to venture into new areas. So you're running a small business and you look into how can you use innovation to do, let's say, go from one area into the other area. So a key point for that is understanding of how can you leverage the base of your business, the way of understanding and the strength of your business in different areas. Imagine you're a consultant, and you look as a consultant into, okay, I want to be a consultant, but I want to be as well looking into how could I build a product company, something which is more into trainings, which is more into ways of thinking that you help others, not in a consultant way, but training others and use your expertise in other settings. So you look into what is your focus area where you're really good in, and then you use that in going into venturing in the other area. So if you have a specific expertise, how can you use that expertise and helping others to use that expertise as well? um, Going into the personal area. So I sometimes get the question like, how can I innovate? And I'm just a mother of four and living at home. So how I can innovate on a daily basis? What can I do? So I believe every one of us can innovate, and every one of us should innovate. That means you need to think differently. You need to like, it's often difficult to understand, yeah, what is innovation? For me, innovation is a behavior. It's a way of thinking which enables you to see things from different perspectives and helps you to do things differently. And that then, if you're in the business area, that helps you to build your business, and that helps you to move things in completely different ways than you would ever think of. So if you're on a personal level, what you can do is, how do other people think about what you're willing to do? How do other people think what what it could be, what could be things differently? How do you see that from a different perspective? So let's take an example. So I'm at home, a mother of four. How can I innovate? So let's say you look into your surroundings. What is the problem you have? Then you take a problem. Let's say, um, what do we take? Let's say there's a problem with, let's say, the sofa. The sofa is squeaking and it's not really working. How can you apply different ways of thinking to do that? So one thing is, who can help me to do this, and what are the different perspectives of what can you do to solve that problem from different ways. So that's really going into all that. Going back again into the corporate world, except someone from you has a question. So if you have a question, please post into the comments. Then I will straight away pick that up and answer that question. Um, Going into corporate world again. So what is the question I get a lot is like, how do you prototype? How do you prototype? So let's first start with what is prototyping. Prototyping is basically taking, if you have a product, if we take a product, you, let's say you want to you have a product which is this bottle. So how could you prototype this bottle or pieces of this bottle in your business? So if you say, yeah, I have a product and I want to prototype more. So you start with having a customer or people you want to sell to. They're having needs, dreams, and desires. If people having needs, dreams, and desires, that means they're looking for ways to fulfill this. Let's say they have the need of going outside and want to take water with them, in a way that they can drink on the way. That's the basic understanding of a bottle. So a bottle helps you to drink water somewhere else. So if they have this needs and dreams and desires, then you figure out how can you fulfill them in different ways. So if you want to prototype, you can use different materials, you can use um, different ways of taking water outside, and that's basically the start of prototyping. That's the way you take an idea, which applying it to a problem, and then you basically take it to market as fast as possible. So that means you're 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 meeting customers, you're meeting potential people who have the same needs and desires, and then you ask them, hey, would be a bottle like this, would that be applicable for you, would that bring you value, or is it something else? And that's the way of starting to prototype. And there are a lot of processes out there which helps you if you're in a large corporation to do that. Moving on to the small business part. It's like, how do you sell different products? So you're in an area where you have one product only, and that's really working, that's really good for you. So how can you venture into other product areas? How can you sell other products? So if we just take my example, I have an innovation coaching business where I help companies from large to small to innovate. That goes into different areas. So what I have as well is I ventured into different areas where I say, okay, what fits to that direction? Because it should be adjacent to what you're doing, because then it will be easier to get people who are working with you and people who are attracted to you already using that. So you use this and say, okay, I have coaching business, I have an innovation coaching business. So what else can I do to help my customers to fulfill things? What then I looked into, I said, okay, I will develop a training which is for coaches to help them to help other companies to innovate as well. So that's basically adjacent to my business, and it helps others to grow as well. So it helps everyone to move to be more innovative. So that's a bit the way of thinking when you look into how can you sell different products. Going back to the corporate world. So how do you co-create? Um, in a lot of big organizations, there's the question on, hey, how do you co-create with different other departments with your customers on the way? So if you look into co-creation is always a perspective of how do you as quickly as possible meet with customers on the way before you even go out with your product, go out with your service. So it's really like attach and invite people to develop together with you, and invite people to go on and really go deeper and ask them to be part of it. So it's like, you don't, I would go out and saying, hey, I have this idea, what do you think about this idea? And then you build a group, maybe let's say a Facebook group as the easiest version of that. Hey, let's look into how we can fulfill this idea. But that means that you put yourself out there, that put your way of thinking out there as fast as possible, and then meet with real customers, read with people who are willing to use that service, and that will help you to gain insights of their needs and desires already from the beginning, and then you can use that um, directly in co-creating together with them, giving them opportunities to directly feedback you, giving them opportunities to change the product as it works for them. Going back into smaller businesses. So one thing I always talk about when you look into prototyping, it's you need to be out there. You need to be connected to your customers as early as possible. So I got the question the other day, is like, how do you interview customers? So interviewing customers is one of the key things to get feedback. And the easiest way to do that is just going out there. Go out on the street. It doesn't matter which product you have. I've done that in a lot of workshops. I've done that in different countries over my life. It's like going into the street and asking people for feedback. And that doesn't mean that you need to have a finished product. You can just explain them an idea that could be as easy as a piece of paper where you say, hey, I have this idea. What do you think about that idea? So that's the first interaction you can have with a potential customer. And that's the physical perspective. If you look into the digital perspective, that's way easier. You're just sending something out in Facebook and LinkedIn and ask people about, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And that's gathering this feedback is key to be able to innovate and to be able to develop your business, to develop things going forward. Going back into large corporations, and that's the last answer and Q&A part for large corporations, except you have more on that. Um, so I often get the questions like, yeah, I'm in a large corporation. So what is the right setup for an innovation team? What is the right setup to build innovation in an organization? So for me, there's no one fits all. You need to understand um, what is the organization about, what is the business about, and then how it makes sense for that business to build an innovation team or build an innovation department to make that happen. I can give you a couple of examples. So I have been in a very large organization where we looked into different setups. One was we have a dedicated team for innovation which is working with like innovation and development topics, and they're coordinating everything which is going into that direction. Another setup is where you have someone who is basically working on the innovation culture centrally, and then you have in other parts of the organization, you have people who are kind of taking this way of thinking as well into their DNA and learning how to do that. So they don't have it as a job title, but they have it as a kind of drive for them, and they like it and like to do it. So they are using it in that way. So there are um, different ways of thinking how you can set up an innovation team. The third one is really an interesting one where you say, okay, we're building a kind of startup on the side of the business, which is not really attached to the main business, which is really going crazy and really developing things on the side, so that people in the bigger organization don't even see what's going on in the smaller startup world. So you can use iterations very fast, and you don't work with the big process of the big large organization. So I've explained now a couple of questions. Do you have more questions? Any questions going forward? They can be anything on innovation topics. If there are no questions, then I will see you next week again. Next week on Tuesday, I will share again live questions on innovation. I will answer questions on innovation, which I gathered over the week, or you join live again and we will see us then and go into details. Thank you very much for joining, and see you next week.